Coming up on a whole year of this bullshit. My emo face has come out of hibernation. I wanted to do black lipstick, but then black lipstick's very messy, so I decided not to. Hello, my name is Grace. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a hot minute. You know, I keep telling myself I'll make videos and then shit happens and then I just sit around and listen to My Chemical Romance for the whole night. That's happened to me for the past 2 weeks. So, but among all that, I still managed to read some books. And even better, some of them is assigned reading from my class. And they're great books. So here we are. I'm going to talk about the books that I read for the month of February. Okay, to start, for the first thing we got to start on is that there is this book that I read in December that I forgot to mention, that I was going to mention in my January wrap-up video because it was released then, but I forgot. So I'm going to do that right now. And that book is Your Corner Dark by Desmond Hall. I won this in a Goodreads giveaway, and then I gave it to my friend who is Jamaican, and then she told me she loves it. So this is, and since this is the February wrap-up video, I feel like this is a really good place to put it, like better to mention it, because it really is a good book. So Your Corner Dark by Desmond Hall follows a young boy named Frankie who lives in Jamaica. His uncle is in a posse, which is a gang, and his dad and Frankie's dad is just trying to keep him on the straight and narrow and not get him involved in any gang activity. However, Frankie's dad does get shot and he is unable to provide the healthcare he needs, so he joins his uncle's gang in order to save his father's life. I really like this book because, first off, it's set in Jamaica, so that's not a place you hear about very often. And I think the other thing that really sort of draws my attention to this book is the fact that it really shows gang members in a more sympathetic light. You know, especially here in the States, we hear gang members and we just think about like, oh, some crazy hooligan who has like a gun down his pants or something. But no, Frankie, and they also touch upon other gang members as well. Frankie joins the gang for selfless reasons. He wants to save his dad. And for many of the other gang members, they want to do it for a sense of community because they come from homes that are not super great. And even Frankie's uncle is a very loving character. He's also really tough, but he establishes this gang so that he can better their community, such as, you know, with community cleanup and like providing supplies to those in need. So really it kind of gives this like three-dimensional light onto what a gang is and why they happen, because where the government fails, people rise up to help each other. Because of that, it's kind of demonized. But this book came out, I believe, January 21st, and I forgot to mention it in my January wrap-up video, but I really wanted to mention it here because I think it's a really good book. And the author is Jamaican too, and then I sent it to my friend who is Jamaican, and then she really loves it, so yeah, so it's a really good book and I think you should all read it. It's really good. And especially I think for young readers too, it's like can teach them a lot about like, you know, not to just look at like the surface level of things. It's really important to go into deeper like the whys and the hows. Anyway, so we're gonna get into the books that I read for the month of February, and it's been a month. You know, it's always a thing with me, I think, every month where it's like, oh, did I read any books today? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I read all those books. Actually, half of these books are assigned readings for my alternate worlds class, which is like a world building class, which is really cool. Like, I thought I was just gonna be stuck reading like a bunch of like literary short stories, but it's like, no, you get to read like sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm like, yay! And like, these are all books that were on my TBR anyway, so it's been really cool. Okay, so the first one is this novella. The first book in the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, All Systems Red. So this I've been seeing around a lot, and it's really thin. It's a series of novellas following this semi-organic sentient construct android called Murderbot. So it's set in this futuristic world. It's a sci-fi story. It's Murderbot is the main character. They are a security unit rented out by corporations to help with various jobs such as, survey, reconnaissance, and this Murderbot this security unit named Murderbot has sort of overridden its governing module, meaning it basically hacked itself to become sentient. It has to keep that secret hidden from the research team that they've been assigned to scope out this unknown planet and its materials. But like a mystery strikes this research team, and Murderbot has to either help or maybe just do its own thing. But most of all, Murderbot just wants to sit around and watch TV all day, and I'm like, damn, me too. I did really like this because it really does something new in terms of narration, and with this POV character is very interesting because Murderbot is semi-organic, so they have cloned human parts on top of their inorganic robotic parts. So it kind of really raises this question on what it means to be human. Even if you have organic parts, are you still considered a human? That's something that the research team also has to reckon with. Minor spoilers, but and so even Murderbot is like themselves sort of questioning, like has a very existential question, like, am I considered human? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have free will? So like this is really interesting. In terms of the story, I was kind of really lost because everything is very much limited within Murderbot's perspective, and then also they use a lot of terminology, and then it's kind of hard to envision everything visually, but you know, in terms of like the concept and the premise and the execution, I think it did really well. And if you really like sci-fi and you really like, you know, these like sort of robot sentient AI stories, then I think this will be really good. And like I am really interested in reading the next few books in the series because there is a little, I do read the sneak peeks. Sometimes they have sneak peeks at the end for the next book. And the way that sneak peek went, I was like, ooh, something's gonna happen to Murderbot, and I really am really interested. So I do highly recommend this if you're into sci-fi, and if like perhaps like if you're not as not a big visual reader like I am, because I really need a lot of like visuals and details and stuff like that to really get immersed. But yeah, I think this is great for people who love sci-fi. So the next book on this list is actually a very serious book, and that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I don't know what really compelled me to pick up this book from the library, but I did, and this was a very heavy, very serious read. For those of you who don't know, there's the Brock Turner case back in, I believe, 2014, where this Stanford frat guy named Brock Turner assaulted a young woman behind a dumpster. Several years later, that woman comes out and speaks her name, and her name is Chanel Miller, and she writes this memoir chronicling the events of the incident and the trial that followed for the next year, all of the stuff that she had to deal with, all of the stuff that affected her mental health and her family, and also all of the aftermath of the trial. And this book also really shows how rape culture is perpetuated, how it's always the victim who's to blame and not the perpetrator, and how that culture is really harmful to victims. But the writing in this book is so strong and so impactful, and I really also feel it as well as a person who sometimes people perceive as Chinese. Sometimes people think I'm white, sometimes people think I'm Chinese. There's no winning with me. But as a person of East Asian descent, I can relate to a lot of the things that Chanel also went through, and also her experiences as well. New York City is, I keep telling you guys, New York City is not a romantic place. I've been through some shit. Sometimes you just want to shake the world by the shoulders and say like, what the F is wrong with you? And so it just really goes to show all of the injustices with the justice system, and especially in its treatment with rape victims, like the aftermath, how trials are carried out, and who gets to see justice. Like, it shouldn't matter if the victim was drunk or not. It shouldn't matter if the victim had a boyfriend or not. And yet all of that came into question while she was on trial, and yet no one really thought to bring up like all of Brock's like other charges with his life. Anyways, what we see in this world, this book really puts into words. It really kind of digs into, it just shows all the hypocrisies in which we treat girls and women. She just puts it into very beautiful, very heartbreaking words. So I highly recommend this book. I think everybody should read it because like I think this is something that also perpetuates itself worldwide because, you know, the patriarchy is still very much real and we should curb stomp it to the ground. Anyway, so the next book that I read on a more lighter note is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is a rom-com-y adult book. Let's say adult. This is a rom-com book set in London, and it follows a young man named Luke O'Donnell, who is the son of a rock star, a washed-up, drug-crazy, infamous rock star. And this guy, Oliver, who is recruited to be Luke's... His name's Luce... Okay, so... No, wait. So his name's Lucian. Luce? Do I say Luke or Luce? Damn, I'm not British. Anyways, so whatever. I'm gonna say Luke. I know his name's Lucian, but they call him Luke as a nickname, and then my American brain's like, oh, C is a K, so Luke. And I'm like, whatever. I give up. His name's Luke. Anyway, so as I was saying, Luke is the son of a washed-up rock star, and Oliver is recruited to be his fake boyfriend when Luke's rock star dad makes a comeback and he is back in the public eye. So this book, oh my god, you guys. I have a lot of thoughts about this book. Where do I even start? Okay, so first off, this is not a bad book. I think it's really cute. I think there were a lot of really sweet moments. But the thing is that a lot of these characters are just... I just wanted to shake them by the shoulders. Okay, so the thing with Luke is that he has a lot of trust issues because as the son of a celebrity, he's always thinking that people who want to talk to him are just in it for the fame. He's afraid to talk to people because he's like, oh, like, are they going to use what I say and publish it in a tabloid like they've done, like people have done before in the past? So he's a lot of trust issues. And yet I know all this, and yet like sometimes Luke is just so... I hate to say it, but he sometimes gets really annoying about it. Like, he would go on a date with Oliver, and I thought, okay, well, that date went a little awkward, but not bad. And he was like, and then Luke was like, I fucked this date up. I fucked everything up. Everything is my fault. And I'm like, calm down. It's okay. A date went awkwardly. You're fine. It happens. I've never been on a date, but I'm pretty sure it happens. So he just kind of did that a lot. And like, yeah, he would like fuck up a bit. And I'm like, oh, that was annoying secondhand embarrassment. But like overall, like, you know, there was always like that little like snarky kind of vibe that he and Oliver were on. And it was like kind of cute. So I was like, okay, maybe this won't go so bad. But then like Luke is like, oh my God, I fucked everything up. It's like, no, you're fine. It's okay, you're fine. But I knew where Luke was coming from because of his trust issues and like all of this stuff with like the tabloids and the fame. It's like, who do you even know to trust if like you think everyone wants something from you? So that's just something that I knew was happening, and I was like, damn it. So like I was still kind of hoping, I was holding out for that character development where like, even though this was a fake dating situation, like, does fake dating ever end with like not real dating? And so the thing with Oliver is that like, you know, they were both in an arrangement. So no matter what, they would still have this arrangement. And yet, and their proximity to each other in this arrangement, of course, will lead to them getting to know each other more. And I'm like, that's exactly what fake dating is all about. So like, I knew it was gonna happen because this is the formula for fake dating that's become very popular ever since All the Boys and To All the Boys and Bridgerton. Like, excuse me, we are on a fake dating craze right now. That is a rant. Back to this. So yeah, I knew all of that. It's just like, and like, also the thing, so in the book, we do get to deal with Luke's stuff, and I'm like, great, you're dealing with Luke's stuff, you're gonna grow as a character. But then we have Oliver's stuff. Now, I'm not gonna get into it too much because that is actually at the very end of the book, and that was also really interesting, but because it was so tacked on at the end, I'm like, damn, we could have gotten into Oliver's shit. We could have gotten to Oliver's baggage, and yet like, because they didn't spend so much time on Oliver as much as they did with Luke, I'm like left a bit unsatisfied with it because they were both really interesting. Because there was also a lot of time spent on like other stuff like various side characters and their shenanigans, and I'm like, I don't really give a shit about all these side characters, I just give a shit about these two. So it was like, I think they mismanaged their time a little bit with this book. But overall, like, it was really cute. And even though the third act conflict is, as you probably guess, kind of shitty, because third act when is a third act conflict ever executed and resolved well? Not in this one. I think a sequel is coming out, because I think I heard rumors from Alexis Hall about a book called Husband Material. So I don't know if that's a sequel or if that's just gonna follow different characters. But I might, if it is a sequel following these characters, then I might as well read it, because I did look up fan fiction afterwards. There's not much, but there is some, and they were really cute. So anyway, rant over about boyfriend material. So the next book on this list is a classic, and that is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is actually the first time I read a Le Guin book. I have read some of her short stories before for class, but this is also for class, which is great because I actually really like this book. So for those of you who don't know, forget everything you think you know, especially that Studio Ghibli movie that came out. And I think there was also a miniseries that came out. Forget all that. So, A Wizard of Earthsea follows a young man named, I think my class said it was Ged, but a part of my brain is like, hey, what if it's pronounced Jed? I'm gonna say Ged. A Wizard of Earthsea follows this young man named Ged in his small village, and he's like, damn, I fucking hate this village. I know I have untapped amounts of magical power within me, and I can go farther than this. So he's like, you know, the picture of an arrogant youth who thinks he can take over the world. And so this wizard named Ogion is like, okay, I'll take you on as my apprentice. But then Ged's like, I don't know, man. All you do is take walks and collect herbs. And Ogion's like, okay, go to school. And so Ged goes to school, and he meets these really cool guys, and he's like, yeah, like, I'm the best wizard of this class, like, fuck all y'all, I'm gonna try and summon a dead woman. And then that spirit that he summons is like, haha, fuck you, and then scars him for life, kills their principal. He's like, I'm gonna haunt you for the rest of your life. And Ged's like, I hate that. Okay. So then Ged basically hits his rock bottom moment, goes through some serious character development, and then basically becomes a wise adult who's like, damn, like, I really got to be careful with magic. There is a world balance that I have to keep track of that all of my elders keep telling me about. And now I have this shadow chasing me, and I don't know how to face it. So really, okay, so basically The Wizard of Earthsea came out, oh my god, when did this come out? I think in the 60s, 1968. And so it really subverted like a lot of fantasy tropes at the time, because this wasn't like a big battle. This wasn't like, you know, a young plucky farm boy fighting a dark lord. This is purely a character-driven story about a boy growing up and trying to face his demons. And at first, as I was reading it, I think the pacing wasn't really for me, because it's pretty fast pacing. It doesn't really get into a lot of like nitty gritty details on like day-to-day life or stuff like that. It's pretty much like, yeah, so that like this tiny book, this like pretty small book, it like basically follows this young man from like childhood to adulthood. But even so, I did enjoy the story. And then when I finished it, the ending is really good. When I finished it, I sat with it, and I was like, okay, like, it just left me with a lot of feelings at the end. And I'm like, okay, so like this book is actually like a lot cooler the more that I think about it, rather than like, as I was reading it, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. But then I came out at the end, and I'm like, okay, so now I get what this book is trying to do. Because like I said, it really subverted a lot of like fantasy tropes at the time. And even in the author's note at the end, Ursula K. Le Guin was like, yeah, I wasn't really interested in like doing like the whole macro conflict thing. You know, I wanted to, you know, subvert the tropes and, you know, follow just a young man. Because, like, she mentioned Gandalf, and she was like, man, like, where does a guy like Gandalf come from? So she's like, that's how Ged was born. And also, you don't realize it until pretty well into the book, but Get is a person of color. And even so, like, a lot of the characters in the cast in this book are described as people with, like, shades of brown skin, and I thought that was really cool, especially for a book that was released in, like, the 60s. Like, wow, like, you know, and even now, fantasy tends to skewer overwhelmingly white. For this book in the 60s to feature a brown-skinned main character, like, wow, that was, like, that's great. That was so great. And but even still, you still got, like, a lot of the whitewashing controversy following this book. But you know all these strings of remakes that are coming out, that shit with, like, Winx, this shit with the Winx. But then you even got Bridgerton, which is complicated. I'm not gonna get into that. But you know, I mean, if somebody were to readapt Earthsea into, like, a very faithful adaptation, I think it would be really cool. I think it'd be really cool. Wink, wink, wink. Come on. For me, just a little bit. Yeah, so anyway, Earthsea is a classic. I highly recommend it because for the time it really subverted a lot of fantasy tropes, and I think it can, you know, kind of it really broke out of the fantasy mold before it was cool. And so, yeah, like I said, the more that I sat with it, the more that I really think, like, I maybe I'll just do a separate little video about all my thoughts, because I don't want to spoil it, because, like, the ending is so cool. It's so cool, you guys. So I highly recommend it. If anyone should give you a classics reading assignment, it's me, and I'm telling you to read Earthsea. So the next book on this list is also very short, even though it took me a long time to read it, and that is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. So The Deep follows this young woman who is a part of a sea-dwelling mermaid people who are descendants of pregnant African women when they were thrown overboard from slave ships. And so we follow this, our main character named Yetu, who is a historian. So the way that works is that historians have all of the memories of their people, all of the memories of their history, and they are the only ones that carry it all. Kind of like a Giver situation, but with Yetu, that really puts a huge damper on her physically, mentally, emotionally, because she's reliving all of these memories of, like, war and pain and suffering. And so one day Yetu decides to escape. I do have a lot of thoughts about this book. Overall, I did really like it because the concept was very interesting, and I think there are just some parts of the story that really gets so emotionally deep, so, like, raw, and, like, really taps into, like, what, like, all of the pressures into being such a important figure in your community, and yet being really alone at the same time, because it's not as simple as, like, being a leader. It's also a serious mental and emotional toll, because she's the only one that has these memories, and she's, like, living them, and, like, and she gets these visions about them, and she can't really control them all the time. How do you, like, ask that of a person? What's the cost of doing this job? And so she decides to escape, and then what are the consequences of that? But then what is she able to gain by shedding the mantle and being herself for a while? So that's just a lot of, like, really interesting places to go to. And then it also kind of goes into the history of the people, like, how are they born, how do they live, where do they get like, their language, and where do they get their names. I think the thing that kind of just gets me, just me personally, is the writing style wasn't really my jam. It felt sometimes kind of technical, and then also there was some, like, POV stuff that I understand now for a reason why, but at the time I was like, who is the we? Because, like, there's some parts in the book where the pronoun is we, and then I'm like, who's we? And then I'm like, oh, because Yetu is probably remembering all of these, and she's, like, in the person as they're remembering, and I'm like, who's we? But yeah, I still do highly recommend this book, because, like I said, I think this is just, like, a personal taste thing that kept me from enjoying it as much as I thought I would. And I really like the ending. I thought the ending was really sweet. Also, I think this would make a really cool movie. Because me personally, like I said, I'm a very visual person, so then I'm, like, picturing how the shot would look in my head, and I'm like, damn, if they got that would be really cool. call me if you want a cinematographer. And I believe this was inspired by a song, but I'm not sure about all the details about that, so you guys can look it up. Anyway, this was actually for class. I don't know what they're gonna ask me about this. I don't really know how to end this. So if this concept interests you, then go read it. I think you should read it. I think it should be read. It's all a matter of personal opinion. And now we're really gonna get into the crux of why my emo phase has decided to get out from hibernation. So, you know, of course I ended up buying the My Chemical Romance biography. Not the Life It Seems. The True Lives of My Chemical Romance by Tom Bryant. Recently, I've just been in a really big MCR kick. I don't know why. Or maybe I do know why. It's because we're stuck in a pandemic for about a year and I'm feeling really, really sad right now. So I decided, you know what, let's read this biography. Overall, this biography is basically stuff that I already knew because I read Wikipedia articles. This is an unauthorized biography that was released shortly after their breakup they broke up in 2013. This book came out in 2014. And this is an unauthorized biography. And I was really confused by what that meant, so I looked it up. An unauthorized biography meant that, like, Tom Bryant didn't really get any fresh interviews for this book specifically. With an authorized biography, they would interview the subjects, they would interview the subjects' partners, they would interview maybe even the subjects' children, and then their coworkers, and then their ex-coworkers. Basically, everyone, but that didn't happen with this book. So basically kind of collects stuff from other publications. Tom Bryant himself is a music journalist, so he's interviewed them a couple times and it's a big compilation of like stuff that's already pretty much out there, except like now it's all in chronological order and like in book form. So yeah, it is kind of funny reading this now after they've announced their reunion tour. It's kind of funny because, like, especially when they got to the end, it's like, oh, we're breaking up, oh, it's so sad, maybe we'll never do this again. And I'm like, you fucking liars. I already knew this stuff, but then reading it in book form, it's like, damn, that's wild. I mean, overall, it was a very well written book. Overall, it was really helpful to have like a chronological compilation of My Chemical Romance's careers and lives up until their breakup. I would like to see an authorized biography, like now, especially now after they've announced their reunion tour. I mean, I guess, because like I am really curious. Now I'm turning it a little bit into a music channel right now, but like I don't know if this reunion tour means a reunion, because I looked it up. There is a reunion tour, but then after that tour, or am I thinking just too far ahead? I don't know. There's no plans for announced so far for what's after the reunion tour. So, I don't know. Anyway, I like this book. I don't know, man. It's just like, when you really just like think about like all the different shit that bands go through. And then but then it's like, damn, this is some real shit that they went through. They stayed in a haunted mansion during the making of the Black Parade. And like, then they went on tour for like 2 years after that. Like, no matter what happens, I still enjoy their music. I still enjoy it a lot. Especially right now. Because I'm going through a lot of shit right now. And it's like, it's nice to listen to. Makes you feel a little bit less sad. Okay, I'm gonna stop being sappy. But yeah, I guess if you're a fan of MCR, I mean, you could buy this book. I bought it, and I read it in like a night. I read it in like a day. I don't know. I am really into biographies, even though I don't really read them a whole lot, but I did buy a bunch of biographies, so I'm like, yeah, maybe I should just take a crack at all these biographies that I have sitting around. That's more or less all the books that I read. It's not a whole lot, but granted, February is the shortest month of the year. Man, I forgot Valentine's Day was a thing. I forgot Black History Month. I did. I don't really know how to end this. I mean, now I'm in a bit of a reading slump. Because I started some books, but then it's like, I I don't want to say what the books are because I've just started. But they started really negatively, and I'm like, I don't really want to feel negative right now. I don't know if I want to reread a book or if I want to continue with these books. Here's the thing, right? I don't know. I feel like I've been DNFing a lot lately. Like, especially YA books. Like, I tried to read this one and I'm like, I'm not sure. So I DNF'd it and then I'm like, oh, but are you sure? But then I'm like, I'm not really feeling it. I don't know. I guess it's just like I'm having like, but because like, I don't know. It's just having a lot of thoughts about DNFing and I'm like, but should I DNF this? Oh, maybe I should give it a chance. But then it's like, I don't know. How much time do you want to spend on it? And that's the thing, right? We've all lost a year of our lives. And you gotta read this book that may or may not be good at the end. And it's like, but you read it. And then you feel bad for not liking it. That's how I've been feeling. Yes, cause I DNF'd Aurora Rising. Because I just lost patience for the characters. And I made it like 30% in. So I feel like I gave it a fair chance, 30-40% in. I keep telling myself, maybe this is the part where I graduate, so to speak, from YA books. But then sometimes there's a really good YA book that comes out and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have to graduate from YA. But then sometimes I'm like, maybe you do gotta graduate from YA. I don't know. That's just a lot of the thoughts that I have. So those are the books that I read in February. This feels like a pretty quick video, but then probably when I go back to edit it, it'll be like a half hour long. Anyways, so if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Let me know what books that you read in February that you really enjoyed, or if there's any of these books that you read and you also really liked. Like, subscribe. I hope you do. I promise I'll try to make more videos, but who knows what March will give me, because February was a bit of a kick in the butt. Every month is a kick in the butt. Especially last year, and then this year is gonna be a kick in the butt. Just sit down and curl up with a good book. Kiss your fandom friends goodnight. So long, good night. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.